Orchestrated original revenge memoir with fresh characters and grounded narrative structure. Orchestrated original revenge memoir with fresh characters and grounded narrative structure. My nephew slid the gift across the white tablecloth with one finger, the way you'd push away a plate of something you'd decided not to eat. It was a gift card. $25 to a chain pancake house off the interstate, the laminate already peeling at one corner because he'd clearly dug it out of a junk drawer on his way to the valet. For you, Mare, he said loud enough that the table beside us turned to look. Figured you could use a night where somebody else makes the food, since the cupcake thing didn't exactly pan out. He smiled the way he always smiled at me, like he was doing me a favor by acknowledging I existed. My mother laughed into her champagne. My father studied his bread plate, and nobody in that dining room, not my brother, not his wife, not my parents in their anniversary best, had any idea that I owned the building we were sitting in. The chandelier over their heads, the marble under their $200 shoes, the rooftop terrace, where the city skyline was about to come on like a switch, had been thrown. All of it sat under a holding company that traced back through 3 quiet shells to my signature. If you've ever sat at a table where your own family treats you like the help, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know I'm not the only one who learned to swallow it with a smile. I said thank you. I always said thank you. I slid the pancake card into my purse next to a matte black founder's card that opened doors in 4 cities, and I let the moment pass because that's what I'd been doing for 11 years, and 1 more hour wouldn't kill me. Let me back up, because the gift card wasn't the start of anything. It was just Tuesday, dressed up for a Saturday. I'm the younger one. My brother is 4 years older, and from the time we were kids, the math of our family was simple. He was the investment, and I was the expense. He was the one who got the SAT tutor and the lacrosse camp and the car at 16. He was the one my mother described to her friends as driven. I was the one she described as sensitive, which in our house was a polite word for disappointing. When he got into a good business school, my parents took out a second mortgage. When I said I wanted to go to art school, my father told me at the kitchen table that he wasn't going to set money on fire so I could learn to draw. So I didn't go. I worked. I waited tables at a diner near the highway, and I took a baking job at a grocery store at 4 in the morning, scoring the tops of baguettes in the dark while the rest of the world slept. And the one person in my family who ever looked at that and saw something other than failure was my grandmother. My grandmother. I called her Gren, had a marigold bed along the side of her house that she'd weed on her knees into her 80s, swatting my hand away when I tried to help. She told me once that marigolds were the toughest flower god ever made. You could neglect them, forget them, let the dog dig them up, and they'd come back orange and stubborn every single year. That's you, she said. People keep underestimating the tough ones because the tough ones don't complain. She was the only person who ever ate my baking like it mattered. She kept a little notebook of everything I made for her, dated, with stars. She gave me, before she died, $11,000 in a savings bond, and a sealed envelope that said, "Open this when you're ready." My brother handled her estate. He was the executor. Obviously, my mother said, he understands money. When the dust settled, I got the savings bond and a box of her gardening tools. My brother got the house, which he sold within the year and rolled into the down payment on a place with a 3-car garage. I never saw an accounting. When I asked gently once, my mother told me to stop being grasping at a time of grief, and I never asked again. What nobody knew was what was in the envelope. It wasn't money, it was Gran's handwriting, shaky by then, telling me she'd watched me my whole life make something out of nothing and that I should stop waiting for this family to hand me permission. "Bake your own bread, Marigold," she wrote. "Don't beg at anyone's table." So I took the $11,000 and I rented a storefront the size of a 1-car garage in a neighborhood everyone said was finished, and I opened a bakery. I named it Marigold. I did everything myself. The baking, the register, the mopping at midnight, the slow walk to the bank with the deposit that some weeks was $40. I told my family about it exactly once at a Thanksgiving, and my brother said, "Cute, let me know when it's a real business." And my mother said something about how at least it would keep me busy. After that, I stopped telling them anything. When they asked how the cupcake thing was going, I'd shrug and say it was tough. Money was tight. You know how it is. And they'd nod, satisfied, because a struggling little sister was a story they understood. A succeeding one would have required them to rearrange the whole furniture of how they saw me. Here's the part they missed by never once driving down to see it. That tiny storefront caught. Not overnight, nothing catches overnight, no matter what anybody tells you, but it caught. A food writer came in on a slow Tuesday and wrote 300 words about the brown butter loaf that ran in the weekend section. The line started the next Saturday and never really stopped. I opened a second location. Then a third. I'd gone a partner. A chef I'd met when we were both broke and stealing each other's ideas. And we built the kind of thing that gets written up in the business magazines my brother actually reads. Except the byline always said the founder was M. Vance. And there's no reason on earth my brother would connect M's Bontas to his little sister Mare, the cupcake girl, because connecting those two people would have meant looking at me long enough to see me. By the time my parents' 40th anniversary rolled around, Marigold was 11 locations across 3 states, and the company had just closed on a landmark building downtown with a members' dining room on the second floor and a rooftop that the city's old money had been trying to get into for 2 years. That building was the Ardsley. And my brother, who plans every family event so that everyone knows he's the one who can afford it, had spent weeks bragging about how he pulled some strings to get an anniversary table at the Ardsley, the most exclusive room in the city where you couldn't just buy your way in. He had no idea who'd signed the lease on his strings. I almost said something a dozen times in the days before. I almost let it slip. But there's a particular kind of patience you learn when you spend your 20s being the one nobody believes in, and that patience told me to wait. So I put on a dress I'd bought second-hand years ago. Not because I couldn't afford better, but because the look on my mother's face when I tried was worth more to me than the look when I succeeded, and I drove my old Subaru to the valet stand of a building I owned. And I handed my keys to a kid named Marcus who I'd personally approved a raise for 2 weeks earlier and who had asked, quietly, by text that afternoon, to please not say a word. The dinner started the way these always start. My brother arrived in a car that cost more than my first 3 years of rent combined. His wife on his arm and a dress with the tags, practically still glittering on it, their 2 kids already on iPads. My brother shook the Maître's hand like they were old friends, slipped him something folded, and announced to the room in general that we'd be needing the good wine. My parents glowed. My father, who never once came to see my bakery, told the table within the first 10 minutes that his son had arrived, that this was the kind of place a man like him belonged. I sat where they put me, which was at the corner, half a seat from the service station where the bus carts came through. My brother arranged the seating himself the way he arranges everything. My parents at the center, his family flanking them. Me at the end, near the swinging door to the kitchen, where I could feel the kitchen heat every time it opened. "You don't mind, Mare," he said, not as a question. "You're used to the back of the house." The menu came and he ordered for the table without looking at me, then paused, performing the pause, and said, "Get my sister the soup. She's watching her money." The waiter, a young woman named Priscilla who I'd hired the previous spring, who I watched keep her face perfectly, professionally blank, looked at me, and I gave her the smallest shake of my head, and she went on. "I want to tell you about the next 90 minutes, because they matter. Because the reveal doesn't land if you don't understand the weight of what was stacked on the other side of the scale." My sister-in-law spent the appetizers describing their renovation in a voice pitched for the next table over. Imported tile, a wine fridge that held 200 bottles, a casita out back for guests, which my father said was tasteful, which is a word my father has never once used about anything I've made with my own 2 hands. When my niece spilled cranberry sauce on the linen, my brother laughed and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart, your aunt probably waits tables, she'll get it." And I felt my mother's eyes flick to me, checking, the way you check a stove you're not sure is off. My phone buzzed in my lap. It was my partner, the chef, who was in the kitchen 40 feet away running service for a room that had no idea its owner was eating soup at the bad table. "You okay out there?" he'd written. "Say the word and I'll send out the tasting menu and tell them it's compliments of the house." I wrote back, "Not yet. Let it cook." Because here's the thing about money in my family. It was never really about the money. My brother makes good money, but I'd quietly made more, and that wasn't the point. The point was the chair. The point was who got the drumstick and who got the dry slice. The point was that for my entire life, the position of the one who didn't make it had been assigned to me at birth and never once reopened for review, no matter what I built, because my being beneath them was load-bearing. It held the whole structure up. If I was a success, then my father had been wrong to refuse me, and my mother had been wrong to favor my brother, and my brother had been competing with someone he told himself didn't count. Easier to keep me in the corner seat. Easier all around. If you've ever been the load-bearing failure in your own family, the one whose smallness propped everybody else up, smash that like button right now, because I want to know how many of us there are. And tell me the one sentence a family member said to you that you have never been able to forget. I read every single one. Mine came around the time the entrees landed. My brother had been drinking the good wine he'd made such a show of ordering, and he got expansive the way he gets, leaning back holding court. He started in on Gran. He does this sometimes when he's had enough to feel sentimental about being generous to the dead. You know, he said, Gran always had a soft spot for Mare. Used to stip her money. I think it's because she felt sorry for her. He chuckled. Somebody had to. My folk stopped. That 11 grand, he went on, to the table, to my parents who were nodding along. I told Mare at the time, don't blow it on the bakery. Did she listen? Of course not. Threw it all into that little shop. Gone. He spread his hands, the magnanimous big brother, sad about my poor judgment. I keep telling her even now it's not too late to do something real. Get a steady job. Stop playing. He looked at me then, finally, the way you look at a child who's tracked mud through the house. Gran would have wanted you to be practical, Mare, not chase little dreams. And something in me, 11 years deep, went very quiet and very still. Not loud. People expect it to be loud the moment you finally stand up. Mine wasn't. It was the opposite of loud. It was the feeling of setting down a bag I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten my shoulders could be level. Because the thing about my brother invoking Gran to keep me small was that he had it exactly backward, and he didn't even know it. And Gran's own handwriting was the reason I was sitting in a building I owned, listening to him tell a room that I had thrown my life away. She didn't feel sorry for me, I said. I didn't say it loud either, but the table heard it because I'd never interrupted him before, not once in 31 years, and the novelty of it landed harder than volume ever could. My brother blinked. What? Gran. She didn't feel sorry for me. She believed in me. I set my napkin on the table. There's a difference, but I wouldn't expect you to know it. My mother's smile went tight. Mare, don't make a scene. Your brother's just looking out for you. He's not though, I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice was, how it didn't shake at all. He never has been. But that's okay, we don't have to keep pretending. My brother recovered the way he always recovers, with a laugh, looking around the room for backup he assumed he had. Okay, somebody's had a glass of wine. Look, Mare, nobody's attacking you. We just worry. You're 31. You're still driving that Subaru. You live in some apartment we've never even... He stopped, waved a hand. It's fine. Let's not do this. Tonight's about Mom and Dad. He flagged down a passing server. Can we get the check? I've got this, he announced, loud to the table, to me the final flourish. I've got the whole thing. Don't even reach for your purse, Mare. I know it's tight. And that, the check, the performance of the check, the I've got this he'd been waiting all night to deliver, that was the moment the screen flashed red. Except in my world, it wasn't a screen. It was a man named Mr. Fenimore. Mr. Fenimore had run the front of the house at the Ardsley for 19 years, since long before my company bought the building, and I'd kept him on and given him a raise and a title because he was the best in the city, and he knew it. He came across the floor now because the server had flagged the check, and he came in his measured, unhurried way, and he set the leather folder down, not in front of my brother who had his card already out, held aloft, waiting to be the hero. Mr. Fenimore set it down in front of me. Miss Vance, he said, and his voice carried, the way a Maître these voice carries when he wants a room to hear that everything is in order. There's no check this evening. I voided it. And may I say, on behalf of the entire house, it's an honor to have you in the room. We didn't realize the reservation was yours." The table went silent. Not the polite silence of a lull, the other kind. My brother's card was still in the air. "I'm sorry," he said, and he laughed, "but it came out wrong. There's a mistake. I'm paying. My name's on the reservation. The name is." "The name on the reservation," Mr. Fenimore said, "perfectly pleasant, is the courtesy hold we place for VIP guests of the founder." He turned just slightly toward me and inclined his head. "Miss Vance is the founder." I have replayed my brother's face 1,000 times since. It did something I'd never seen it do. It came apart, slowly, like a building you watch on the news, where for 1 second it's still standing, and then it isn't. "Founder of what?" my mother said faintly. "Of the Ardsley," Mr. Fenimore said, "and of Marigold." He paused, and I love him forever for the pause. "I assumed you knew." I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because the videos always make it sound like triumph, like fireworks, and it wasn't. It was grief, mostly. It was the grief of watching the people who'd raised me realize in real time that they had spent 3 decades looking at a wall where a window had always been. My father's mouth opened and nothing came out. My sister-in-law, who'd spent the night narrating her renovation, set down her fork very carefully, the way you set down something you've just understood you can't afford. And my brother just stared at me, the card still in his fingers, his whole carefully built self going grey around the edges. "Marigold," he said, "the cupcake place that you said failed." "I never said it failed," I told him. "I let you believe it. You wanted to believe it. It was 11 locations the last time you asked, but you didn't ask. You announced." I stood up. I didn't tower over him. I'm not a tall woman, but I stood, and that was enough. This building, this room, the valet who parked your car, the kitchen running this dinner, the wine you bought to show everyone you'd arrived, it's mine. All of it traces back to $11,000 Gran gave the granddaughter she believed in, and a note she left telling me to stop begging at this family's table. My mother started to cry, and the cruel small part of me, the part that had been kept in the corner seat for 31 years, noticed that she was crying the way she'd cried over my brother's gifts, easily, performatively, for an audience. The rest of me just felt tired. My brother stood up too fast, knocking his chair. Mare, listen. This is incredible. I'm proud of you. I am. I always knew you had it in you. I was trying to motivate you. That's how I... The words tumbled out of him, and underneath them I could hear the gears, the same gears that ran his whole life, already calculating. "Look, we should talk. I mean it. You and me, we've got the same blood. We think the same way. I've got some things I'm working on, some opportunities, and with your kind of capital behind." And there it was, 40 seconds. It took him 40 seconds, from finding out who I really was to asking me for money. "Stop," I said, and he stopped. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life I wasn't looking up. I saw the whole of it now, the way you see a magic trick once you know where the card was hidden. The bragging that was never confidence but fear. The cruelty that was never strength but a man so terrified of being ordinary that he had to keep someone beneath him so he'd always have a floor to stand on. He'd chosen me for that floor when I was 4 years old and he was 8, and he'd been standing on me ever since. And the most pitiful thing I understood in that bright, silent dining room was that he genuinely did not know how to stand any other way. "You handled Gran's estate," I said quietly, because there was one more thing and I'd carried it 11 years. I never saw an accounting, I never asked, because Mom told me grief made me grasping. But I built a company, brother. I know how to read a ledger now. And I know exactly what our house sold for, and I know what I got, and I know the difference went into your down payment. I watched it land. I'm not going to ask for it back. I don't need it. But don't you ever again stand at a table and tell people Gran felt sorry for me. She didn't trust you with what she left me. That's why it came to me in a savings bond and a sealed envelope you couldn't open. She knew exactly which one of us she was protecting it from." The room had stopped pretending not to listen. My father found his voice. "Mare," he said. And it cracked. This man who had told me he wouldn't set his money on fire so I could learn to draw. Mare, I didn't. We didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. That's the whole thing, Dad. You didn't know because you never once came to see. Not the first store, not the line out the door, not any of it. You drove past the exit 100 times. I wasn't angry when I said it. That was the strange part. The anger had been the load bearing wall, and now that it was down, what was left was just the plain shape of the truth standing on its own. I sent money home, 2 years ago, when the second mortgage was eating you alive, it came through a foundation, anonymous, and I let Garrett think he was the one who'd arranged it because he needed that more than I needed the credit. The family friend who covered the balance, that was me. That was the Cupcake girl. My mother put her face in her hands. My brother sat back down slowly, like his legs had stopped agreeing to hold him. Why? He said, and for once there was nothing performed in it. Why would you do that and not say anything? Why would you do that and not say anything? Why would you let me? God, I've been telling people for years that I. He stopped. His eyes were wet, and I think, for the first time, real. I was jealous of you, he said to the tablecloth, even when I thought you had nothing. I was jealous because Gran looked at you like you were enough as you were. She never looked at me like that. I had to earn it every day, and you just had it. He looked up, and I couldn't stand it, so I made you small. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. It was the truest thing he had ever said to me, and I believed it. And it changed nothing about what I was going to do. I walked around the table to him. I didn't hug him. I put my hand on his shoulder, the way you'd touch something you'd finally stopped being afraid of. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. I'm not going to carry this anymore. It's too heavy and I've got a life to run. His face lifted, hope rushing in that quick. So we'll fix it. You'll help me with. No, I said gently. Forgiving you isn't the same as fixing you. I forgive you and I'm letting the anger go because the anger was only ever poisoning me. But I'm not going to be your floor anymore, and I'm not going to be your bank. You build your whole self out of standing on me. You're going to have to learn how to stand on the ground like everybody else. I squeezed his shoulder once and let go. I think you can. I think there's a real person under all of this. But you only meet him when you got nothing left to prove to anybody, and I can't take you there. Nobody can take you there but you. I turned to my parents. My father was trying to stand, to say something, his hands working. I crossed to him and I kissed his cheek, the way I used to when I was small and he was reading the paper and wouldn't look up. Happy anniversary, Dad, I said. I hope it's a good year. I meant that too. Then I picked up my purse with the pancake gift card still in it, and I walked out of the dining room of the building I owned, past Mr. Fenimore, who gave me the smallest nod, past Priscilla, who I'd be promoting on Monday whether she knew it or not, past the kitchen door where my partner stood in his whites with flour on his sleeve and an expression that asked if I was all right. And I gave him a thumbs up that meant better than I've ever been. I took the elevator to the roof. The terrace was empty between seatings, just the city laid out below in all its lit-up sprawl, and the warm dark and the sound of the kitchen exhaust humming somewhere underfoot. I'd built this, not the building. The building was just brick. The other thing, the thing where I could stand on a roof in the middle of my own city and not need a single person at that table downstairs to tell me I was real. I'd spent 11 years thinking I was alone because I was the black sheep, thinking I had to buy my way back into the flock with silence. And standing up there, I understood I'd had a flock the whole time. I had Priscilla and Mr. Fenimore and my partner with the flower on his sleeve and 400 people across 3 states who clocked in every day to make something my grandmother would have put a star next to in her little notebook. I had Gran, who'd been gone 11 years and was more present in that envelope than my whole family had managed to be at the table. And I had myself, which it turns out was the one I'd been waiting on permission from all along. I took the pancake gift card out of my purse. $25 peeling at the corner. I almost threw it off the roof. And then I laughed because Grant would have called that a waste, and instead I tucked it back in. I'd give it to the first person I saw who looked like they needed a warm meal on a cold night. Marigolds come back stubborn and orange every spring because nobody waters them and they don't wait around to be asked. My phone buzzed. The chef. They're gone. Your brother left his card on the table. You want me to mail it back? Leave it, I wrote. He'll come back for it. He always comes back for the card. Then I put the phone away and I stood there a while longer, level-shouldered, in the building my grandmother's faith had built, looking out at a city that had no idea the Cupcake girl had been quietly feeding it for years. It took me 31 years to learn that blood doesn't make a family. Showing up does. And the people who never once drove down to see what I was building had told me everything I needed to know about which table I actually belonged at. If you felt that if you've ever had to walk out of a room full of people who shared your blood to finally find your peace, tell me in the comments. Tell me you've cut a tie to save your own life. I'll be reading every one of them. And I promise you, from a rooftop you can't see, I see you too. You don't have to keep setting yourself on fire to keep your family warm. Some of us were always the marigolds, and marigolds were never meant to beg. For 11 years, I told myself I was quiet because I was kind. Standing on that rooftop, I finally admitted the truth. I was quiet because I was afraid. Afraid that if I corrected my brother even once, the whole family would close ranks and I'd lose the only people who were supposed to be mine. So I let Grant build his confidence on my silence, year after year. And every time I swallowed an insult to keep the peace, I was paying a tax on a peace that never actually existed. Here's the thing I understand now, that I couldn't see then. Nothing that happened at that dinner was random. Grant didn't get cruel by accident. He got cruel because for 30 years it worked, because nobody ever made it cost him anything. My parents didn't ignore the bakery by accident. They ignored it because believing in me would have meant questioning every choice they'd made about which child deserved the second mortgage. Cause and effect all the way down. And the bakery didn't survive by luck either. It survived because Gran handed her trust to the one grandchild she knew wouldn't squander it. And because I got up at 4 in the morning for years when no one was watching and no one was clapping. If there's anything I'd want you to take from my story, it's that the life I walked into that night wasn't built on talent. It was built on 3 plain things, and you already have all 3 inside you. The first is doing right even when no one's keeping score. Paying my parents' mortgage anonymously, letting Grant keep the credit, because I'd decided who I was going to be regardless of who was looking. The second is the patience to read a situation clearly instead of reacting, knowing when to hold my tongue, and just as importantly, knowing the exact moment to finally stop. And the third is the sheer stubbornness to keep showing up, to score one more baguette in the dark, to come back orange and unbothered like Gran's marigolds after a hard winter. I didn't win because I had a building. I had the building because long before anyone respected me, I refused to let other people's low opinion become my own. The day I stopped waiting for my family to hand me permission was the day everything I'd quietly built finally had room to mean something. So if you're sitting at a table right now, where you're the one in the corner seat, hear me. You don't have to humiliate anyone to be free. You just have to stop volunteering to be the floor other people stand on. Keep your integrity when it's inconvenient. Keep your eyes open when it would be easier to look away. And keep getting up. The respect you've been begging for was never theirs to give. It was always yours to build.